We put out a request for questions and then I will answer it. How important is the name? If you want to build a loyal following, you really got to be there for them regularly. How do you turn your listeners into leads? Oh, the $1 million question, right? Just ask a direct question and just shut. Welcome back to another episode of Smarter Podcasting with me, your host, Niall Mackay, the podcast guy. I started my first podcast in 2019, and it is now the longest running English language podcast in Vietnam. It's in the top 5% of podcasts worldwide, and we have just passed 6 years of publishing. That podcast led me to start this show, Smarter Podcasting, and create 7 Million Bikes Podcast. So we're a podcast production agency that has helped over 70 podcasts across the world make the best podcast possible. We've helped with thousands of episodes, millions of downloads, and we've helped podcasts get to the top of the charts. If you want to work with us, go to our website, 7millionbikes.com. You can book a call with me and we can talk through about how we can help you. I would love to do that. And now what we're doing monthly is a question and answer episode. So thank you very much to everybody who asked me questions. If you want to join in, then go to my LinkedIn. Again, the link will be in the show notes, or just go to LinkedIn, type in Niall Mackay. Now, my name is spelled a little bit funny because it's Scottish, so it's Niallmackay, Niall Mackay. Sounds like Niall, I know, thanks mum, but it's Niall. So go onto LinkedIn and we put out a request once a month for questions, and then you can ask your question and then I will answer it. So I'm really excited because this is the first episode we've done of a question and answer session. Normally what I'll be doing is sharing my tips and tricks, talking to industry experts, everything that I can do to help you make the best podcast possible. So this episode is a special question and answer episode that we're going to be bringing to you every month. So let's get started. The first question was, how important is the podcast name? Now, I think that goes down to like, how important is the name of your album? How important is the name of your first child? Maybe it's not that important, but I think it might be. I mean, the short answer is it's so important because obviously it means everything about your podcast. It's the first thing that people read. They don't really remember the show notes or the titles or anything like that. They're going to remember the name. So I guess to go into a little bit more detail, how do you choose the name? There's a few simple things that you need to do. One is keep it short and simple. I know everybody knows that phrase, KISS. Keep it short and simple. The biggest reason for that is think about the real estate that's on the podcast app. So let's just talk about Spotify and Apple and YouTube as well. You don't actually get that much real estate. And think about how people consume podcasts. Most people use a phone these days. It's like 80% of listeners use a phone. So when you're scrolling down and you're deciding what podcast you want to listen to, it actually cuts off, I think, after like 70 characters, like not very many at all. I should know that off the top of my head, but I know it's short. If you make your name too long, it's going to get cut off. So it really is that first couple of words that are really, really important. Make sure you keep it short and simple. It's really important for the artwork as well, that you can make it bold and bright and really, really easy to read as well. So the podcast name is important. It's important to keep it short and simple. I would also add that make sure you make it really obvious what your podcast is about. Now, the reason for that, again, is when you think about people's habits, they're scrolling down, they're looking for a different podcast. They want to be able to look at yours and know immediately what it's about. Now, for example, my podcast, which I started in 2019, as I mentioned, it was originally called 7 Million Bikes, a Saigon podcast. And I can't remember the exact reason why I changed it, but I eventually dropped the 7 Million Bikes and it just became a Saigon podcast. And then as I started interviewing more and more people around the world, it became a Vietnam podcast. As I mentioned, I can't remember the exact reason why I changed it, but I hope it was this reason, because now I look back and I think that was a good idea. Part of the problem with a name like that right now, I do get this as well. People want to come up with like a fun, quirky name. They're like, oh, I know what this means. I was the exact same, right? 7 Million Bikes. The reason for 7 Million Bikes, if you've been to Vietnam or Southeast Asia, you'll know that motorbikes is just part of the culture here. It's part of the defining culture here, especially in Saigon. And when I started that first podcast, I just read that there were 7.3 million motorbikes in Saigon alone. It's a city of 9-10 million people. So a crazy, crazy amount of motorbikes, which you can see on the street. And I just thought it was funny and quirky. 7 Million Bikes, a Saigon podcast, right? And I still think it's a great name. But in terms of a podcast name, I now realize it's not great. Nobody's searching for that. And I've even had people contact me asking, do I rent out motorbikes and things like this in the past? So make it really, really obvious. Now it's called a Vietnam podcast. Then I took some advice and I actually ended up dropping the from the podcast directory. So if you go on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, etc., it's just called Vietnam Podcast. And the reason for that is twofold. One, super obvious. You know exactly what it's about immediately. The reason I dropped the was because if somebody's searching for a podcast about Vietnam or something to do with Vietnam in Spotify or Apple, that's probably going to be the first word they're going to type. They're not going to type So I dropped the So if anyone searches for anything Vietnam, and you can go try it now, go to Spotify, type in Vietnam, my podcast will be one of the first ones that come up. And that's not only because of the name, it's because of the longevity, the quality, the consistency of it. All of that goes into the algorithm, which makes it rank higher. But that is why the name is the way it is, to make it super easy, super obvious for somebody to understand it, and also make it really easy to read as well. So to go back to your question, how important is the name? It's massively important. So have a good think about it, play about with it, see what you can do in just 3 words. I would advise for an indie podcast, or any podcast really, try and avoid using the in the title and just like I did. So my podcast is called technically a Vietnam podcast, but as I mentioned, I dropped the so that when someone types in Vietnam right away, it comes up. Obviously, there's podcasts like the Joe Rogan Experience, the Diary of a CEO, the Mel Robbins podcast. I don't know what the Conan O'Brien one's called, probably the Conan O'Brien podcast. But these ones are all backed by massive media companies, huge budgets, and celebrities, right? So people know who they are already. For you as an indie podcaster, you probably don't have the brand recognition of these celebrities. So I wouldn't personally use the or as the first word, just because you do have limited real estate and you want to make it really clear and really obvious what you're doing. So try and relate it to your niche and be as specific as possible. Don't just call it the business podcast, which I guarantee if I looked it up right now, there'll be a million podcasts called the business podcast. If your podcast is about coaching men over 40, call it Coaching Men Over 40 podcast. I don't know. It's a terrible example because I haven't thought about it. But try and make your name as accurate as possible to what your podcast is about. Now, in saying this as well, I personally would not use the word podcast in your title. And again, this completely contradicts what I've done because I've called my podcast a Vietnam podcast. Now, again, I started off and I'm still an indie podcaster, so I didn't know any better at the time. And I think even now you see people do it all the time. It makes it obvious. You're like, it's a podcast. What I've learned over the years is people know it's a podcast, right? They're on Spotify, they're on Apple Podcasts, they're in the podcast section. Apple Podcast by names is podcast, so they know what they're looking for. You don't need to put it in the name that it's a podcast. People already know that. So again, talking about real estate, valuable real estate, I would eliminate the word podcast from your show and just call it what it is. Try and make it very specific to what you do. Don't make it too long, 3 or 4 words. And just last of all, taking advice from the great Adam Shively, add a tagline to your podcast show title. So you don't need to change the name of your podcast. Just change it in your host. So I use Buzzsprout. Change it in your host so it appears on the directories. And again, this just makes it super easy for people to understand what your podcast is and what's it about. So for my show, the name technically is a Vietnam podcast. But if you go to Spotify right now, it's going to be Vietnam Podcast, Culture, Community, and Conversations. So immediately when you read this, you know, for one, that it's not about the war. Most people overseas think everything about Vietnam is to do with the Vietnam War. And then if you live here, you realize nothing is to do with the Vietnam War anymore. It's 50 years ago. But it makes it really, really obvious what it's about. So look at that app that you're on right now, or look at YouTube if you're watching, and you see that this show is called Smarter Podcasting, Making Podcasts Better. So just Smarter Podcasting can still be a little bit vague. There's also another show called Podcasting Smarter by Podbean, which is huge. It's not super obvious what Smarter Podcasting is about, right? You can guess it's about podcasting, but not 100% sure. So the tagline is making podcasts better. And that's what we try to do with this show, is give you all the tips and tricks to make your podcast better. So trying to make it more specific. It is something I'm thinking of redoing soon. So maybe if you're listening or watching this way in the future after it's been released, it could be different by now. But the point is, it will always have a colon. And if you look at all the clients that we work with, all their shows have a colon at the end of it, which is where you can use some keywords if that's helpful for you, where you can just make it really, really obvious. So again, going back to the original question, how important is the podcast name? It's as important as naming your child. All right, the next question is, how often should you release a podcast? And is there an accepted frequency or one that performs better? All right, that's a great question. A lot of people ask this. So how often should you release a podcast? I mean, I think you probably know the answer, what I'm going to say. It needs to be every week, but it just really depends. So there are podcasts that release daily. There's one by the New York Times, which is, the name is escaping me right now. They release every day. It's a news podcast. I know another podcast called the Rush Hour Podcast. It releases 15 minutes every day. If your podcast is about the news or something about that day and you can do it quick enough, you can record it and release it and publish it. Maybe you don't do different artwork every day, then obviously you can do it daily. For most podcasts, and for example, this one, weekly is what you should be aiming for. Smarter Podcasting, we started out doing it, I think, every week in the beginning. And then I was like, I can't do this. I just can't keep it up. I didn't have enough time, didn't have the energy for it. It was too difficult. And then after a while, I realized I need to do it every week. And a Vietnam podcast when it's in season, and that's another question, but you can do seasons as well with a Vietnam podcast. I kind of just make up seasons, which really helps me break it up. In between, I can do best ofs, I can take breaks, I can publish old episodes. Just kind of helps with your energy a little bit. So if you don't have to do it every week, you can do seasons. But ideally, you want to do it every week. If you're serious about building an audience, if you want to build a loyal following, you really got to be there for them regularly. Every 2 weeks is okay. But think about the podcast that you listen to. Like my favorite right now is The Rest is Football. I think they do 2 or 3 episodes a week. Like I really look forward to a new one coming out. I'm loving the Titanic podcast by Noiser right now. It comes out every Tuesday if you're not a member. If you're a member, you can binge it. But it comes out every Tuesday morning. Like I look forward to it. I can't wait for it. It's like, right, Tuesday morning, the podcast is out. So that's the other part about why you need to do it on the, you'll hear this all the time, consistency. That's why you need to do it on the same time, the same day, the same cadence, every week, every month, every 2 weeks, because your listeners will get used to it. And I mentioned every month there. Some people talk about doing that. I have some clients that do that because they literally don't have the time to record more than that. I'll just be really honest, you won't build an audience with once a month. It's too far apart. It's only 12 episodes a year. Let's be honest, if I see a podcast, the last episode was a month ago, you're probably not going to know if the next episode's coming out next week or next month or in 6 months. Some podcasts' frequency or consistency is so bad like that. So to answer the question, every week, 100% for sure. Same time, same day, every 2 weeks. As long as you're doing it on the same day, same time, got that consistency is the most important part. Every month, I mean, I just wouldn't bother, to be honest. But I don't want to be a gatekeeper. I don't want to be someone to tell you not to do it. If you love podcasting and you just want to do it for the sake of it, and you only have time to do it once a month, then please go for it. But just realize it's going to be really, really difficult to build an audience. And then what was the next part of the question? Let me just remind myself. Is there an accepted frequency? I mean, no, there's no accepted frequency. It's just do whatever works for you. Everyone's different. Every podcast has a different cadence. And then the other part of that question was, is there one that performs better? There's no data or anything that says, if you do this, it will do better. I think though, I mean, I haven't seen the data, but I don't even know if there's any research on it, but a podcast that does monthly or every 2 weeks, I'm actually going to look that up, but I don't think it will do very well. Again, the difference between daily, weekly, monthly, it really is going to come down to what your podcast is about. Maybe if you do a history podcast and it takes a lot of research and it's just you once a month, as long as you do it every single month on the same day, on the same time, it's really good quality. I could see how that would work because doing it weekly would be difficult. If you're doing a news podcast, it's got to be every day. Like I said, I listen to football podcasts. They've got to be every week to cover the latest events in the football and what's just happened. So a sports podcast, any sport, that would be similar. So it's really difficult. I don't think there's any specific consistency that does better. But just think about what your podcast is about and what it matches. Because I'm just thinking out loud, you know, if you were to do a podcast once a month, but you were talking about the latest football news or the latest sports news, it's just probably not going to work. So Yeah, think about that. Thank you very much for that question. The next one is, how would you advise newbies on getting the right awareness of the conversation and how to ask direct questions? That's a great one. And it's something I'm going to be talking about a lot more, is hosting and how to be a good host. And it's something that you can never stop learning. It's something that I really enjoy doing. I never thought I would be, I hate to sound arrogant, be this good at it. The only reason I'm saying that is because of the feedback I've gotten and that people enjoy my hosting. And I've gotten to the stage where I can answer questions like this and I can give advice. So the first part is, how do you get the right awareness of the conversation? The answer is active listening, which is what is one of the most difficult things about podcasting is, and I have a little bit of a background in this because I've done stand-up comedy. I'm a comedian. When you're on stage as a comedian and you have your jokes in your head, this is the beautiful thing about being a comedian. You watch one and you think that they're just speaking, and a lot of them are, so I can't speak for every comedian, but for me, I knew my set list, I knew my joke list in my head. So I'm constantly thinking what's coming next and reacting to the audience and saying words at the same time. It was such a weird out-of-body experience. I remember explaining it to people and being like, words are coming out my mouth, but my brain is somewhere else. And that comes down to practice so that the words are coming out almost automatically. I've found a lot of similarities in podcasting where the speaker, the guest, will be talking. I have to listen to them, but I have to think at the same time. So it's really, really difficult. And it's just a skill you should just practice and you'll get there. I love it as well. Adam Shidley talks about you can't get success in 10 episodes, even 100. You need to do 200 episodes, 300 more. It's just one of those skills that you're probably just going to get better at with time. And I think I've gotten better at with time as well. So to answer the question of how do you get the right awareness, you just practice that active listening. So make sure you're absorbing what they're saying, thinking about how can I go to the next question. The worst is if you've got a question in your head and you kind of just ignore what they've said and then just automatically go to the next question. That's one of the worst things I think you can do. And I'm not saying I've never done it, probably have, but try your best to be actively listening, preparing what you want to say next and how you can relate it to what they're saying, and be prepared to change your question at the same time as well and let the conversation flow naturally. So I think that will really help as well. The other part of the question is, how do you ask direct questions? Well, you just got to be direct. It's a really difficult skill to learn. I think as a host, you need to realize that your job is, as a host, as an interviewer, I'm showing my age here and I'm showing that I'm from the UK, obviously, but I think of people like Terry Wogan and Michael Parkinson. You even think of more modern hosts like Graham Norton. Think about what they do. They actually don't talk a lot. They give the question and then they let the guest speak. So one of the things is ask that direct question, then let the guest answer it. So how do you do it directly? Well, one, try and have a think beforehand, either have an outline of what you're going to talk about or roughly know the questions that you want to ask if you haven't written them down, because a lot of people do that. I don't do that, but I do have an idea in my head where I want to go. Have them written down. Be careful though, because then it can come across really scripted, things like that. I think the biggest tip here though to ask direct questions is what not to do. And what not to do is ask 3 questions at once. This is the biggest advice I give to the people I work with. And again, I'm not perfect at it. I still do it sometimes, and I'll normally catch myself doing it and apologize to the guest right away, or even edit it out afterwards, because that's the magic of editing. Try your best to just ask 1 question at a time. What do you want them to tell you? What do you want to learn? What do you want the listener to learn from what you're about to ask? So think about that beforehand. And it's something, because most people are very polite in real life. We don't really ask direct questions when we're hanging out with friends. Like, what did you do today? What did you do last night? Where were you? We don't ask it really pointed like that. We just kind of converse. So just practice that when you want to know something, ask the question. And then this is the most difficult part as well, is then just shut up. You have to be prepared to leave a bit of silence for them to fill it in. And I think this is a big thing I've learned as well, is it's really easy to ask a question, then explain what you mean or explain what answer you want to get. And I still do this. I'm still bad at it. Sometimes I still do this, but it's something I'm actively practicing in my head, is just ask a direct 1 question and then just pause, just stop And it can feel really awkward. And again, this goes back to me doing comedy as well, because there's jokes that you tell where you leave a pause on purpose. And to be honest, in the beginning, especially when you're starting out as a comedian, you would never do that. It's terrifying. You don't want to leave any dead air at all. And that was, for me, was a sign I was becoming a better comedian when I got more and more confident to be able to just, in the middle of a joke or the end of a punchline, leave that pause and let the audience fill it in. It's the same when you're podcasting. Ask the question, leave a pause. 9 times out of 10, they'll start speaking. And just remember as well, the magic of editing, if that pause goes on over a second, you can always cut it down in the edit. All right, thank you for that question. What's the next one? How do you turn your listeners into leads? Oh, the $1 million question, right? For me, the biggest thing you have to do, one, is produce great content. Produce value in whatever it is you're doing so that people trust you. Trust, like, and know. Is that what people talk about? Greg Wasserman talked about that lately on the podcast, and Charlotte mentioned the same thing as well. First of all, you want them to trust you. So produce valuable content, great content as well, good quality audio, good quality video. Make sure that they understand that what you're producing is not just quality content, but quality produced, quality production as well. So they trust you, so they know you, and so they like you. So that goes without saying. That's the first thing you have to do. Then how do you convert them into leads? The biggest thing that I've learned is give a lead magnet. Give something for free so you can capture either the email address or the phone number or the LinkedIn. So right now, for Smarter Podcasting, go to my website and then you can download my free ebook, How to Turn Loyal Listeners into Customers. That is my lead magnet. This is so meta right now. But if you go to my website right now, there's going to be a pop-up for that. Even in the links, even in the show notes, there'll be a link. To get that free ebook, you just need to put in your email address, and then automatically you go into my email flow. You'll get a bunch of emails spaced out over time that have already been set up, and you go into my email mailing list, and suddenly you become a customer or a potential customer. This is the thing with podcasting I talk to a lot of people about. It's really difficult to measure direct ROI. For most podcasts, they're just another marketing channel. And I like to compare it to TV ads. How many times have you ever seen a TV ad for example, fabric conditioner for your clothes, and then immediately got on your phone or run out to the shops and bought some fabric conditioner? I would guess probably never, right? Coca-Cola, whatever product it is, you see it on TV, you don't buy it right away. TV ads, they know this when they buy the TV ads, right? But what they do know is the next time that you're in the supermarket and there's this whole shelf of fabric conditioners, brand recognition, you're going to be like, oh, I know that one. I saw that ad. I'm going to buy that. So that's where I think podcasting comes in, is whatever your niche is, no matter what it is, you want to build that trust, know, and like, so that when people are ready to make a purchase, I always use the example of hammers, but DIY, right? Say you have a DIY podcast. When they're thinking, I got to do that DIY, the first person they're going to go to or go to your channel is you, right? That's maybe a bad example because maybe they can't buy your services. You could if you're a local podcast, if you're a local DIY podcast. Yeah, that's a good example, I guess. So you're a local DIY podcast. Someone's in that area. They got to do a DIY job. They got to do a paint job. Who's the first person they're going to contact? Because they know you. So that is how you would convert listeners into leads. It's a slow game, top of funnel marketing, all of that kind of stuff. You're not going to convert them overnight. Some might, but generally not. So I would set up a lead magnet, offer that for free, collect emails and phone numbers, and then go from there. And don't forget, go to my website right now and get my free ebook. All right, that's a great question. Next one. I love this one. This is an easy one. Which web app podcast editor is the best in your opinion? Well, if you follow me, you know I'm a massive fan of Descript. And I actually got an email from them yesterday saying that I am a power user and in the top 5% of editors using Descript. So that I was like, wow, okay, I do use it a lot. So we've been using it exclusively now for 4 years. Just keeps getting better and better. The thing we like about it the most is it's cloud-based. So we can share it among teams. We can share it among clients. I don't even know how this technology works. It's almost immediate. I mean, I can be on a project with one of my team and they change something and I see the change happen right away and vice versa. We can make changes, send it to a client. They can give us feedback. We can change it right away. And it's all done in the cloud. So we don't need to upload, download stuff every single time. So it just saves so much time. It's just such a great program. And I am an affiliate. So go to the notes if you haven't downloaded it already. Click on that link. I will get a small commission if you buy it. That's all. What's the best way to promote my podcast on social media without feeling spammy? Don't be spam, I guess. No, again, it just comes back to give value. So whatever your niche is, find groups, find hashtags, provide content that is related to that niche. I mean, just being spammy, and I've done it. I've really done it. You get kicked out a lot of groups if you do it. Most groups won't even let you post links to your show or anything like that. So you do just have to give value. That's the biggest thing. So be a person of value in those groups, right? So if your niche is knitting, and we've done a podcast before about knitting for a client, be active in those groups, answer questions. You could share information from your podcast that you learn. But the biggest thing is just don't share the artwork to your show and then be like, don't miss this episode. That's the biggest thing that annoys me, is when people just put, you don't want to miss this episode. Like, why not? I have no interest in SEO. I do, but just for example, I have no interest in SEO. I am not interested in this at all. I actually was talking to somebody recently. They had a cybersecurity podcast for businesses. This does not apply to me at all in the slightest. So think about that. Don't post your podcast everywhere if it's about cybersecurity for business and say, you don't want to miss this episode. I do want to miss this episode. I have valuable time. I don't want to spend it listening to a podcast about cybersecurity. So don't spam. Don't just say generic stuff. Definitely, this was even before the world of ChatGPT. Don't use ChatGPT to write all your posts. It's really obvious. I mean, you can use it to help you, but definitely make sure you edit them. And just don't blast it everywhere without any thought. Make sure that you're providing value in whatever community that you are in, and don't just share all your links. So it does really go back to, as well, the short form content, which has just revolutionized podcasting really in the last year or so. We make so much short form content now because that's what people consume on Instagram, on TikTok, on YouTube, on Facebook. People love these short videos. So if you don't want to be spammy, don't spam. Create short form content, not audiograms, videos like this. Create short form content, then post that everywhere. So you think about it, like we use LinkedIn, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube Shorts. So 5 platforms, 1 piece of content. So you produce 5 pieces of short form video each week. That's 25 pieces of content, 25 platforms, whatever, however you want to call it. 25 pieces of content that you're putting out. And if you can average 500 to 1,000 views on each of those pieces of content, times that by 25, you're getting 25,000, 50,000, 100,000 views on that short video that may have come from a podcast that only gets 50 to 100 listens. So that really is a way to amplify your reach without being spammy. So to answer that question, and a quick short answer is give value. All right, thank you so much for watching or listening to this episode of Smarter Podcasting. This was our first ever question and answer episode. So thank you so much to everybody who put your questions on LinkedIn. So remember, go to LinkedIn, Neil Mackay, the podcast guy, look me up, connect with me, and look out for that post that's going to be coming out once a month asking for your questions that I will then answer on Smarter Podcasting. And remember, if you want to work with us or you want to know more information about how you can work with us, go to 7millionbikes.com. There's a button in the top that says Talk to Neil. That's me. And book a call, and I'd love to have a chat with you. See how we can work with you. And don't forget as well, there's my blog is on there, this podcast, Smarter Podcasting. There's so many resources on there to help you make the best podcast possible. All right. Thanks very much. I'm looking forward to another one of these soon. And make sure you follow, subscribe, rate, review, all of these things with this episode as well. Cheers.